Subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab. Now let's begin. Harvey Wiggins wiped the grease from his hands with a red shop rag, the fluorescent lights of his auto repair shop humming overhead. It was nearly 6 in the evening, and the last customer had picked up their sedan an hour ago. He'd stayed late to finish an engine rebuild, finding solace in the mechanical precision of pistons and timing belts. There was something honest about engines. They either worked or they didn't. No gray areas, no hidden motives. His phone buzzed against the metal workbench. Angela's name lit up the screen. "Hey," he answered, tucking the phone between his ear and shoulder as he continued organizing his tools. "Harvey, I need you to pick up Emma and drop her at my mother's house." Angela's voice carried that clipped tone she'd developed over the past year. Efficient, transactional, like she was checking items off a list rather than talking to her husband. Harvey straightened, setting down the wrench he'd been holding. "Your mother's? What? I have that work conference in Atlanta this weekend, remember? I told you about it 2 weeks ago." He did remember, but she'd said her sister Brooke would watch Emma. "I thought Brooke was taking her." "Brooke canceled. Mom offered." There was an edge to her voice now, preemptive irritation at an argument she expected him to make. Harvey walked to the small office attached to his shop, away from the smell of motor oil and brake fluid. Through the window, he could see the last traces of sunset painting the Texas sky orange and purple. "Angela, you know Emma doesn't like staying there. She's 7 years old, Harvey. She doesn't like broccoli either, but she eats it. That's not the same thing. My mother loves her granddaughter. Emma just needs to spend more time with her. She's too attached to you as it is." The comment landed like a wrench to the gut, but Harvey had learned to navigate these conversations carefully. Angela had been different when they first met 9 years ago. Warm, spontaneous, full of laughter. She'd been a paralegal at a small firm, working her way through night school for her law degree. Harvey had just opened his shop after leaving the Marines, and they'd met when she brought her dying Honda Civic in for what she hoped would be a cheap fix. He'd given her a fair price and asked her to dinner. She'd said yes. The early years had been good. Emma's arrival had been unexpected but welcomed. Harvey had held his daughter in the hospital, her tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb, and felt something shift in his chest, a fierce, overwhelming need to protect this small person from everything bad in the world. But something had changed after Angela passed the bar and joined a prestigious firm in Austin. The late nights became later. The weekend work became constant. And her mother, Dolores Flores, who Angela had always maintained a polite but distant relationship with, suddenly became a fixture in their lives. "I'll pick Emma up from daycare," Harvey said, checking his watch. "But I'd rather keep her with me this weekend. She can help out at the shop. She loves." "Harvey, I already told my mother. Don't make this difficult." The line went dead. Harvey stood in his office, surrounded by framed pictures of classic cars he'd restored and a single photo of Emma from her last birthday, face covered in chocolate cake, gap-toothed smile wider than the sky. He pulled up his contacts and called the daycare. "Little scholars, this is Stacy speaking." "Hey Stacy, it's Harvey Wiggins. I'm going to be about 20 minutes late picking up Emma." "No problem, Mr. Wiggins. She's in the art room with Miss Jean. See you soon." Harvey locked up the shop, the familiar ritual of checking doors and setting the alarm doing little to ease the tension in his shoulders. He climbed into his pickup truck, a 95 Ford F-150 he'd rebuilt from the frame up, and headed across town. 25 minutes later, Emma burst through the daycare doors and ran straight into his arms. Her dark hair, so much like Angela's, was pulled into 2 messy ponytails, and she had paint smudges on her cheeks. "Daddy, look what I made." She thrust a construction paper creation into his hands, a house with 4 windows, a red door, and 2 stick figures in the front yard. "One tall, one small. That's us," she explained, pointing. "At our house. I made the windows yellow because you said sunshine makes everything better." Harvey crouched down to her level, studying the picture like it was a masterpiece. "This is incredible, Em. We'll put it on the fridge the second we get home." Her smile faltered. "Mommy said I'm going to Grandma Dolores's house. Just for the weekend, kiddo. Mommy has to go to Atlanta for work." Emma's small hands gripped the straps of her backpack. "Can't I stay with you? I've got to work on Mr. Peterson's Mustang all weekend. It wouldn't be much fun for you. I like the shop. I can hand you tools. I know the difference between a Phillips and a flathead now." Harvey felt that tug in his chest again. "I know you do, and you're the best helper I've ever had. But this is what we're doing this time, okay? The drive to their house took 15 minutes, most of it spent with Emma telling him about her day, how Jesse Mack had shared his cookies at lunch, how her teacher Miss Jean had read them a story about a brave knight, how she'd gotten every spelling word right on her practice test. Their home was a modest two-story in a quiet neighborhood, with a maple tree in the front yard that Harvey had planted the month before Emma was born. Angela's Mercedes was already in the driveway, which meant she'd left work early. That was unusual. Inside, Angela was in the kitchen, her laptop open on the counter, phone pressed to her ear. She wore one of her court suits, navy blue, perfectly tailored, and her dark hair was pulled back in the tight bun she favored for trial days. She glanced up when they entered, held up one finger in a wait gesture, and continued her conversation. No, tell them we're not settling for less than $2 million. The liability is clear. I don't care what their expert says. Fine. I'll call you from Atlanta. She hung up and immediately started typing on her laptop. Emma, go pack your bag. Clothes for 3 days, your toothbrush, and that stuffed rabbit you sleep with. Can I bring my art supplies? If they fit in your bag. Angela didn't look up from her screen. Emma trudged upstairs, her earlier excitement deflated like a punctured tire. Harvey waited until he heard her bedroom door close. You're really not going to reconsider this? Angela's fingers paused on the keyboard. When she looked at him, her brown eyes held more exhaustion than anger. Harvey, I don't have the energy for this argument. My mother offered. Emma will be fine. She needs to learn that she can't always get her way. This isn't about getting her way. She's uncomfortable there. She's 7. She's uncomfortable anywhere without you hovering. That's not healthy, Harvey. She needs to be more independent. Being close to your kid isn't hovering. Angela snapped her laptop shut. You know what? Maybe that's true in your world, where you can take her to work with you and let her play with wrenches. But I have a career that requires me to be places, and I can't bring a 7-year-old to client meetings. My mother is helping us out. Show some gratitude. Harvey opened his mouth, then closed it. This was familiar territory. Any criticism of Dolores led to Angela defending her, which led to Harvey being painted as ungrateful or controlling. He'd learned to recognize the pattern, even if he hadn't figured out how to break it. When will you be back? He asked instead. Monday evening. Maybe Tuesday morning if the conference runs late. She reopened her laptop, the conversation clearly over in her mind. Harvey went upstairs to find Emma sitting on her bed, a small duffel bag beside her. She'd packed her clothes neatly, something she'd learned from watching him prep his go-bag during his Marine days. The stuffed rabbit, a floppy-eared thing named Mr. Buttons that Harvey had won at a carnival when Emma was 3, sat on top. You ready? He asked. She shook her head, but stood up anyway. The drive to Dolores Flores's house took them out of Austin proper and into the outskirts, where developments gave way to older properties with more land between them. Dolores lived in a 2-story craftsman that had been in the Flores family for 3 generations, surrounded by oak trees and far enough from neighbors that you couldn't see another house from her front porch. Harvey had always found the place unsettling, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly why. It wasn't the house itself. It was well-maintained, freshly painted, with flower beds that Dolores tended religiously. Maybe it was the isolation, or the way the old oaks seemed to lean over the property like they were trying to keep something in. Or maybe it was Dolores herself. Dolores Flores was a small woman in her early 60s. With steel gray hair, she kept short and a face that seemed incapable of genuine warmth. She'd been a nurse for 30 years before retiring, and she carried herself with the brisk efficiency of someone used to giving orders in emergency rooms. When Angela had introduced them, Dolores had looked Harvey up and down like he was a used car she was considering and finding wanting. The driveway crunched under his tires as he pulled up to the house. The sun had set completely now, and the porch lights cast long shadows across the yard. Daddy, Emma said, her voice small. My stomach hurts. Harvey turned in his seat. Like you're sick. Like scared hurts. He unbuckled his seatbelt and moved to the back, sitting beside her. Em, what are you scared of? She picked at the zipper on her duffel bag. Grandma Dolores is different when you and Mommy aren't there. Different how? She's mean. She says things. What kind of things? Emma shrugged, not meeting his eyes. Just mean things. About how I'm too loud or too messy, or I ask too many questions. And she makes me sit in the closet. Harvey felt his jaw tighten. The closet? What? She calls it quiet time. She says children should be seen and not heard, and if I can't be quiet, I have to sit in the closet until I learn. How long does she make you stay in there? I don't know. A long time. It's dark and I don't like it. Harvey's hands curled into fists. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to think clearly. Why didn't you tell me this before? Mommy said I was exaggerating. She said Grandma loves me, and I need to be grateful and stop making things up for attention. The front door opened, and Dolores stepped onto the porch. Even from the truck, Harvey could see her thin lips pressed together in disapproval. Stay here a second, Em. Harvey got out of the truck and walked to the porch. Dolores stood with her arms crossed, wearing a cardigan despite the warm evening. She'd been filling your head with stories. Dolores said by way of greeting. Emma said you make her sit in a closet. I give her time to reflect when she misbehaves. Children today have no discipline. Angela was raised properly, and look how successful she's become. Your daughter could use the same guidance. She's 7 years old. Locking her in a closet isn't discipline. It's my house and my rules, Dolores interrupted. Angela trusts me with Emma. If you have a problem with how I run my household, take it up with your wife. Now, it's getting late, and the child needs dinner and bed. Harvey looked back at his truck, where Emma's face was pressed against the window, eyes wide and pleading. Every instinct he'd developed in the Marines, the ones that kept him alive in Fallujah, the ones that told him when a situation was wrong, screamed at him to get back in that truck and take his daughter home. But what would he tell Angela? That he defied her explicit instructions based on a 7-year-old's complaint about timeouts? Angela already accused him of being overprotective, of undermining her parenting. He could see the argument already, see how it would drive another wedge between them. He walked back to the truck and opened Emma's door. Come on, kiddo. Daddy, please. Emma grabbed his leg with both hands, her small fingers digging into his jeans. Please don't leave me here. Please. I'll be so good. I'll be quiet at the shop. I won't ask for anything. Please, Daddy. Not again. The desperation in her voice nearly broke him. Harvey knelt down, taking her hands in his. It's just 2 nights, Em. And if anything happens, anything at all, you call me immediately. I don't care what time it is. You call me, and I'll come get you. Okay. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Harvey carried her duffel bag to the porch. Dolores took it without a word. Emma walked slowly to the door, looking back at her father every few steps. She'll be fine, Dolores said, putting a hand on Emma's shoulder. Won't you, Emma? Emma nodded, but didn't speak. Harvey watched as they went inside, the door closing with a finality that settled like lead in his stomach. He sat in his truck for a long moment, hands on the steering wheel, trying to convince himself he was doing the right thing. He drove home, but the house felt too empty, too quiet. Angela had already left for the airport, leaving a note on the counter about emergency numbers and when she'd be back. Harvey tried to watch TV, tried to focus on the engine rebuild he had planned for tomorrow, but his mind kept returning to Emma's face at the window, her small voice begging him not to leave her. At midnight, he finally fell asleep on the couch, the TV still on. At 10:47 p.m. the next day, Saturday, Harvey was under the hood of a '67 Mustang when his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. Hello. Is this Harvey Wiggins? A man's voice, breathless, concerned. Yeah, who's this? My name is Jim Wilkinson. I'm calling from your daughter's phone. I found her walking down Highway 71, about 6 miles east of Route 290. Sir, she's barefoot and covered in blood. Harvey's wrench clattered to the concrete floor. What? Is she hurt? Where is she? I pulled over when I saw her. She's in my truck now. I gave her my jacket. Sir, I don't think it's her blood. She won't tell me what happened, but she's terrified. She just keeps asking for her daddy. Your number was in her phone under IC. Harvey was already running to his truck, phone pressed to his ear. Where are you exactly? Mile marker 223, on the eastbound side. There's a gas station another mile up. I'll take her there and wait for you. Is she okay? Let me talk to her. A pause, then Emma's voice, small and trembling. Daddy, baby, I'm coming. I'm coming right now. Are you hurt? I ran away. I had to run away, Daddy. There was so much blood, and she wouldn't wake up, and her voice dissolved into sobs. Emma, listen to me. You're safe now. This man is going to take you to the gas station, and I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't hang up, okay? I'm here. Harvey threw the truck into gear and peeled out of his shop parking lot. He kept Emma on the phone, talking to her about anything. The Mustang he was working on, what they'd have for dinner, a movie they'd watch together. Anything to keep her calm, to let her know he was coming. Jim Wilkinson's truck was parked under the harsh lights of the gas station when Harvey arrived. The man was in his 50s, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, standing near the passenger door like a guard. When he saw Harvey's truck, he nodded. Harvey barely put the truck in park before he was out and running. Emma was wrapped in an oversized jacket, her feet dirty and scratched. Her clothes, she was wearing a nightgown, Harvey realized, stained with dark splotches. When she saw him, she stumbled out of the truck and collapsed into his arms. Harvey caught her, dropping to his knees, holding her so tight he was afraid he might hurt her. She buried her face in his shoulder and sobbed, her small body shaking. "I've got you," he whispered. "I've got you, Em. You're safe now. I've got you." Over Emma's shoulder, Harvey met Jim Wilkinson's eyes. The older man looked shaken. "I was driving home from my shift at the plant," Jim said quietly. "Saw her in my headlights, just walking in the grass beside the highway. No shoes, that nightgown. At first I thought she was a ghost. Then I saw the blood." Harvey carefully pulled back to look at Emma. Her face was tear-streaked, but uninjured. He checked her arms, her legs, scratches from running through rough terrain, but nothing serious. The blood on her nightgown wasn't hers. "Emma," he said gently, "whose blood is this?" She looked up at him, and what he saw in her eyes was something no 7-year-old should ever have, a terrible, empty horror. "Aunt Brooke," she whispered. Aunt Brooke came to Grandma's house, and they were yelling, and there was a man there, Uncle Lance, and Grandma got really mad and... Her breath hitched. There was so much screaming, and then Uncle Lance had a knife, and Aunt Brooke was on the floor, and Grandma told me to go to my room, but I saw. She couldn't finish, dissolving into sobs again. Harvey's mind raced, trying to process what she was saying. He looked at Jim. "Thank you for calling me. For stopping." Jim nodded. "You need to get her to a hospital, and probably call the police." "Yeah." Harvey stood, lifting Emma with him. She wrapped her legs around his waist, clinging to him like she'd never let go. He carried her to his truck, settling her in the passenger seat and buckling her in. "There's a blanket behind the seat," he said. "Wrap up in that, okay?" He turned back to Jim, pulling out his wallet. "I can't thank you enough." Jim waved him off. "Just take care of your little girl. And whatever happened at that house, I hope you make them pay for putting that look in her eyes." Harvey shook his hand, then climbed into his truck. He looked at Emma, wrapped in his work blanket, staring straight ahead with those haunted eyes. "Emma, I need you to tell me exactly where Grandma's house is. Can you do that for me?" She nodded, giving him the address in a monotone voice. Harvey started the engine, but instead of heading toward the hospital or home, he turned the truck east, back toward Highway 71, toward Dolores Flores's house. "Daddy, where are we going?" Harvey's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "To make sure Aunt Brooke is okay." "She's not okay, Daddy. I know, baby. I know." They drove in silence, Emma giving him directions in that same flat voice. When they finally turned onto the long driveway leading to Dolores's house, Harvey could see lights on inside, flickering shadows moving behind curtains. He parked at the end of the driveway, keeping the truck hidden behind the oak trees. "Emma, I need you to stay in the truck. Lock the doors. If anyone comes near you who isn't me, you call 911. Understand? Don't leave me again, Daddy. Please. I'm not leaving you. I'm going to check on Aunt Brooke, and then we're going to the police station together. But I need to see what happened first. Can you be brave for just a little bit longer?" Emma nodded, though her eyes were terrified. Harvey took his phone from his pocket and pressed it into her hands. "You keep this. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, you call 911 and tell them everything." He kissed her forehead, locked her in the truck, and moved toward the house. The front door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, Harvey could hear voices, Dolores, sharp and commanding, and a man's voice, younger, panicked. "We need to move her," the man was saying. "We can't just leave her here." "Shut up and let me think, Lance." Dolores's voice. "Where's the girl?" "Emma, I don't know." She ran. "Jesus Christ, Dolores, this wasn't supposed to happen. You said Brooke wouldn't show up. You said." "I said shut up." Harvey eased the door open further. The house's entryway opened to a living room, and from his angle, he could see a pair of feet on the floor, woman's feet, motionless, in a spreading pool of dark blood. His Marine training kicked in, his mind cataloging the scene with cold efficiency. One victim down. Two hostiles, one armed. No visible weapons, but assumed presence. Unknown number of additional threats. But beneath the training was a white-hot rage that he'd only felt a handful of times in his life, all of them in combat. His daughter had been in this house. She'd witnessed whatever happened here. She'd been so terrified, she'd run 6 miles barefoot to escape. Harvey stepped into the house. Dolores and a man Harvey didn't recognize, tall, thin, maybe 30, were standing over Brooke Keith's body. Angela's sister. She wore scrubs, like she'd come straight from her shift at the hospital. The knife lay beside her, blood pooling around the blade. The man, Lance, saw Harvey first. His eyes went wide. Who the hell? Dolores spun around. For just a moment, Harvey saw genuine fear flicker across her face. Then it hardened into something else, something calculating. Harvey, she said, her voice regaining composure with frightening speed. Thank God you're here. There's been a terrible accident. Brooke came over, very upset, and she. Don't. Harvey's voice was quiet, but it cut through her words like a blade. Emma told me what she saw. The man, Lance, took a step back, and Harvey noticed his hands were shaking. There was blood on his shirt, splattered across his jeans. Where's Emma? Dolores demanded, and something in her tone made Harvey's skin crawl. Not concern, not worry. Something predatory. Somewhere you'll never touch her again. Harvey pulled out his phone, watching both of them carefully. I'm calling the police. Don't move. Lance lunged. He wasn't a fighter. Harvey could tell that immediately. Lance came at him in a wild, panicked rush, more desperate than dangerous. Harvey sidestepped, caught the man's arm, and used his momentum to drive him face first into the hardwood floor. In 3 seconds, Lance was on his stomach, arm twisted behind his back, gasping for air. Dolores didn't move. She stood over her daughter's body, watching Harvey with eyes like chips of ice. You just made a terrible mistake, she said softly. Harvey kept his knee on Lance's back and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Harvey Wiggins. I'm at 4724 Old Creek Road. There's been a murder. The victim is Brooke Keith. The suspects are Dolores Flores and Lance Larson. I have one of them restrained. Send police and ambulance immediately. He gave the rest of the details, keeping his eyes on Dolores the entire time. She hadn't moved, hadn't tried to run. She just stood there, and something about her absolute stillness was more terrifying than if she'd been screaming or crying or trying to flee. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. My daughter witnessed this, Harvey said, his voice low and dangerous. She's 7 years old, and you let her see this. You put her in a position where she had to run 6 miles down a highway, barefoot, covered in blood, to escape. Whatever happens next, whatever they charge you with, it won't be enough. It will never be enough for what you've done to her. Dolores's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You always were a self-righteous bastard, Harvey. So certain you know what's best. But you don't understand anything about this family. About what was necessary. Necessary. Harvey felt his control slipping. What the hell could make murdering someone in front of a child necessary? Brooke was a problem, Dolores said calmly, as if she were discussing the weather. She found out about things she shouldn't have. She was going to ruin everything. For Angela, for this family. I protected us. That's what family does. Red and blue lights flooded through the windows. Car doors slammed, boots pounded on the porch. Police. Show me your hands. Harvey raised his hands, never taking his eyes off Dolores. I'm Harvey Wiggins. I'm the one who called. This man on the floor is one of the suspects. That woman standing there is the other. The victim is on the floor between them. Officers flooded into the room, guns drawn. They separated Harvey from Lance, handcuffed them both. Protocol, Harvey knew. Everyone gets cuffed until they sort out what happened. 2 officers moved to Dolores, who allowed herself to be handcuffed without resistance. Paramedics rushed to Brooke, but Harvey could see it in their faces. She was gone. My daughter is in my truck at the end of the driveway, Harvey told the officer holding his arm. She's 7. She witnessed this. She needs medical attention. We'll send someone, the officer said. No, I need to go to her now. She's terrified. Sir, you need to stay here until we. My daughter is alone in a truck, and she just watched her aunt get murdered. Harvey's voice rose despite his efforts to control it. I called you. I restrained the suspect. Check the 911 call logs. But I need to get to my daughter right now. The officer looked at his partner, then nodded. Johnson, go with him. They walked Harvey out of the house, still handcuffed, with Officer Johnson beside him. Harvey could see his truck through the trees, Emma's small face pressed against the window. When she saw him, she threw open the door and ran. Wait. Officer Johnson started, but Harvey was already moving, dropping to his knees despite the handcuffs. Emma crashed into him, sobbing. Daddy, Daddy. I was so scared. I thought they got you too. I'm okay, baby. I'm right here. Harvey looked at Officer Johnson. Please. The officer hesitated, then uncuffed him. Harvey wrapped his arms around Emma, and she clung to him like she was drowning, and he was the only solid thing in the world. More police cars arrived, then an ambulance, then another. The quiet country road became a chaos of lights and voices. A female officer knelt beside them, young, with kind eyes. Hi there, she said gently to Emma. My name is Officer Stacy Johns. Can you tell me your name? Emma looked at Harvey, who nodded. Emma Wiggins. Emma, I need to ask you some questions about what you saw tonight. Is that okay? Emma buried her face in Harvey's shoulder. Can it wait? Harvey asked. She's been through enough. I understand, Mr. Wiggins, but we need her statement while the memory is fresh. Sometimes when we wait, children forget important details, or they start to doubt what they saw. I promise I'll make it as easy as possible. They moved to Officer Johns' cruiser, and Emma, with Harvey's arm around her shoulders, told her story. She spoke in that same flat, empty voice that broke Harvey's heart. How Brooke had shown up at Dolores's house around 8 p.m., angry and yelling about money and what you've been doing. How Dolores had called someone, Lance, and he'd arrived 20 minutes later. How the argument had escalated, voices getting louder and meaner. How Emma had been told to stay in her room, but had crept to the stairs because she was worried about Aunt Brooke. And then she described what she'd seen. Lance pulling the knife, Brooke screaming, Dolores just standing there watching. The blood. The terrible silence that followed. Grandma saw me on the stairs, Emma whispered. She told Uncle Lance to get me. I ran to my room and locked the door and climbed out the window. I ran, and I couldn't find my shoes, but I just kept running because I knew they would hurt me too if they caught me. Officer Johns looked at Harvey, and he saw his own fury reflected in her eyes. You did the right thing, Emma, Officer Johns said. You were so brave. Your daddy is here now, and no one is going to hurt you. They took Emma to the hospital despite her protests. Harvey never left her side. Doctors examined her, took photos of her scratches and bruises, collected her blood-stained nightgown as evidence. A child psychologist came to talk to her, asking gentle questions about what she'd seen, how she was feeling. Through it all, Emma held Harvey's hand, her grip so tight it hurt. It was nearly 4 a.m. when they finally released them to go home. Harvey carried Emma to the truck. She'd fallen asleep in his arms the moment they left the hospital, exhausted beyond measure. He laid her in her own bed, tucked Mr. Buttons beside her, and watched her sleep for a long time. The scratches on her feet had been cleaned and bandaged. The blood had been washed away, but the haunted look in her eyes, that would take much longer to heal. Harvey's phone buzzed. Angela. He'd called her hours ago, left messages, sent texts. She hadn't responded until now. Harvey? What the hell is going on? I have 17 missed calls, and the police just called my hotel asking me to come back to Austin immediately. Your mother and some man named Lance Larson murdered your sister tonight, Harvey said, his voice empty of emotion. Emma was there. She saw everything. She had to run 6 miles down the highway to escape. Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, that's not possible. I found Emma on Highway 71 covered in Brooke's blood. She witnessed the murder. The police have Dolores and Lance in custody. Brooke is dead, Angela. He heard her breath catch, heard what might have been a sob. No, that's... Brooke is fine. I just talked to her yesterday. She came to your mother's house tonight. Something about money, about what Dolores had been doing. They argued. Lance stabbed her. Emma saw everything. Oh God. Angela's voice broke. Oh God, is Emma okay? Is she hurt? Physically, she'll be fine. Everything else. Harvey looked at his daughter, sleeping fitfully, clutching her rabbit. We'll deal with everything else. I'm catching the first flight back. Harvey, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know my mother would. We'll talk when you get here, Harvey said and hung up. He sat in the chair beside Emma's bed, watching over her as the night slowly gave way to dawn. His mind was already working through what would come next: the investigation, the trial, the questions, the media attention. The way Emma's life had been irrevocably changed in a single night. But beneath all of that was a cold, hard certainty. Dolores Flores had taken something from his daughter that could never be given back. She'd stolen Emma's innocence, her sense of safety, her trust in the adults who were supposed to protect her. And Harvey was going to make absolutely certain she paid for that. Not just in prison time or legal consequences. He was going to destroy her in ways she couldn't even imagine yet. He just needed to be patient, to be smart, to plan carefully. Because Harvey Wiggins wasn't just a father protecting his daughter anymore. He was a Marine who'd learned patience in the mountains of Afghanistan, who'd learned strategy in the streets of Fallujah, who'd learned that sometimes justice and revenge were just two different words for the same thing. And Dolores Flores was about to learn exactly what it meant to make an enemy of both. Monday morning arrived with a phone call from Detective Omar out of the Austin Police Department. Harvey had been expecting it. He'd prepared for it. In fact, staying up most of Sunday night while Emma slept, researching Texas law, reading everything he could find about criminal procedure and victim rights. Mr. Wiggins, I'm the lead detective on the Brooke Keith homicide. I need you and your daughter to come to the station this afternoon for a full statement. I know Emma spoke with Officer Johns at the scene, but we need more detailed testimony. What time? 2 p.m. We've arranged for a child forensic specialist to conduct the interview. It'll be recorded, but we'll make it as comfortable as possible for Emma. Harvey agreed and hung up. In the next room, he could hear Emma's soft breathing. She'd barely left his side since Friday night, sleeping in his bed, following him from room to room when she was awake. She didn't want to talk about what happened. She barely ate. She'd asked twice when Mommy was coming home. Angela's flight had landed Sunday evening, but instead of coming home, she'd gone straight to the police station to identify Brooke's body and give her own statement. She'd called Harvey afterward, her voice hollow and broken. They showed me pictures, she'd said. The crime scene photos. Harvey, there was so much blood. My baby sister. She was just trying to help people. She was a nurse. She saved lives. What did Dolores have on you? Harvey had asked, because by then he'd had time to think, to piece together the things Emma had said. Emma mentioned Brooke said something about money, about what your mother had been doing. What was she talking about? A long pause. I don't know. Angela. I don't know. Harvey. I don't know what Brooke found out. I don't know why my mother would. She couldn't finish. She still hadn't come home. She'd checked into a hotel instead, saying she needed time to process, needed space. Harvey didn't push. Part of him was relieved. He wasn't sure what he'd say to her when he saw her face to face. At 2 p.m., Harvey and Emma arrived at the police station. The child forensic specialist was a woman in her 40s named Dr. Chelsea Weston, with a warm smile and gentle manner that put Emma slightly more at ease. They conducted the interview in a room designed to look less intimidating. Comfortable chairs, soft lighting, toys in the corner. Harvey watched through a one-way mirror as Emma recounted the events of Friday night again, this time with Dr. Weston asking careful questions, helping Emma organize her memories chronologically. It took 2 hours. Emma cried 3 times. She asked for Harvey twice, and both times he came in, held her, whispered reassurances until she was ready to continue. When it was over, Detective Ott walked Harvey to his office. Your daughter is incredibly brave, he said, gesturing for Harvey to sit. Her testimony is solid, consistent with the physical evidence, with what we found at the scene. Lance Larson is already trying to make a deal. He's claiming Dolores manipulated him, that he didn't mean to kill Brooke, that it was self-defense gone wrong. Self-defense, Harvey said flatly. His story is that Brooke attacked Dolores with a knife. He tried to intervene. Brooke turned on him. He grabbed the knife in the struggle, and it just happened. Ott shook his head. It's bullshit. The blood spatter patterns, the knife wounds, Emma's testimony, none of it supports his version. But his lawyer's going to try. What about Dolores? She's not talking. Lawyered up immediately. But we're building the case. Harvey, I need you to understand. This is going to be a long process. Trial probably won't happen for at least a year, maybe longer. And Emma is going to have to testify. Harvey had known this, but hearing it still felt like a punch to the gut. She's 7 years old. I know. Dr. Weston will work with her, prepare her. We'll do everything we can to minimize the trauma. But her testimony is crucial. Without it, the defense could claim it was an accident, that your daughter misunderstood what she saw, that a 7-year-old's memory can't be trusted. My daughter didn't misunderstand anything. I believe you. But I've seen good cases fall apart because a child's testimony gets torn apart by a defense attorney. We need to make sure Emma is ready. Harvey leaned forward. I need you to tell me something, detective. Emma said Brooke came to Dolores's house talking about money, about what Dolores had been doing. What did she mean? I'd studied him for a moment. I can't share details of an ongoing investigation. My daughter witnessed a murder because of whatever this is about. I deserve to know. Another pause, then outside. We're looking into Dolores's finances. Brooke Keith worked at Mercy General Hospital in the pharmacy. She reported suspicions to hospital administration about medication discrepancies, drugs going missing, prescriptions being filled that shouldn't have been approved. The hospital started an internal investigation. Harvey felt something cold settle in his stomach. Dolores was a nurse with a lot of connections still in the medical community. A nurse who suddenly started living beyond her means about 2 years ago. New car, extensive renovations on her house, expensive trips, all on a retirement income that doesn't add up. Ott tapped his pen against his desk. We think Brooke figured out what her mother was doing. Probably confronted her about it Friday night. And Dolores decided to eliminate the problem. What about Lance Larson? How does he fit in? He's a pharmacy tech at a different hospital. We're guessing he was part of the operation, falsifying records, diverting medications, something like that. When Brooke showed up making accusations, Dolores called in her accomplice to help handle the situation. Harvey sat back, processing. So this was about prescription drug fraud. Likely, but it's bigger than that. We're finding connections to other people, other pharmacies. This might have been going on for years. Dolores Flores wasn't just stealing pills. She was running a distribution network. And anyone who threatened to expose it. Ott spread his hands. Well, you know how that ended. Does Angela know about this? We've asked her about her mother's financial situation, but she claims she didn't know anything about where the money was coming from. And right now, we have no evidence to suggest she was involved. But, Ott hesitated. But what? Your wife's law firm represents several pharmaceutical companies. She's handled cases involving regulatory compliance, controlled substances, that kind of thing. It's possible, and I'm not saying this is what happened, but it's possible that Dolores had access to information through Angela. Maybe Angela mentioned something about a case, about how hospitals track medications, about vulnerabilities in the system. Maybe Angela didn't even realize she was providing her mother with a roadmap. Harvey thought about Angela's increasing distance over the past year, her late nights, her defensiveness whenever Harvey questioned Dolores's involvement in their lives. You think Angela helped her? I think Angela might have unwittingly provided information her mother exploited. There's a difference. But I'd advise you to be careful about what you tell your wife regarding the investigation. Until we know for certain she wasn't involved. She's my wife. She's also Dolores Flores' daughter. And families protect each other, sometimes even when they shouldn't. Harvey left the station with Emma's hand in his mind churning. When they got home, Emma immediately retreated to her room. Harvey stood in the kitchen, staring at his phone. Angela called an hour later. How did it go with the police? Emma gave her statement. They recorded everything. Detective Ott says her testimony is solid. That's good. A pause. Harvey, I need to see her. I need to see both of you. Can I come by? When? Now? I'm already on my way. Harvey wasn't surprised. Angela needed control, needed to feel like she was managing the situation. She arrived 20 minutes later, still wearing the same clothes she'd worn to identify Brooke's body. Dark jeans, a simple black sweater, her hair pulled back messily. She looked like she hadn't slept. They sat in the living room, the distance between them on the couch feeling wider than the few inches of cushion. The police told me about the drug operation, Angela said. About what my mother was doing. Did you know? No. God, no. Harvey, I knew she had money, more than she should have had, but I thought maybe she'd made smart investments or... Angela covered her face with her hands. I didn't ask questions because I didn't want to know. Because some part of me suspected something was wrong, and I didn't want to deal with it. She used you, Harvey said quietly. Your knowledge, your cases. She got information from you. I never told her anything confidential. I never. Angela stopped, her face pale. Wait. There was this case last year. A pharmaceutical company I represented was being sued over improper distribution of opioids. I was working from home one weekend, and my mother stopped by. I was stressed, venting about the case. She asked questions. I thought she was just being supportive, taking an interest in my work. What kind of questions? About how controlled substances are tracked from manufacturers to pharmacies. About what kind of documentation is required. About the gaps in the system, the places where things could slip through. Angela's voice cracked. Oh God. I gave her a blueprint. I told her exactly how to run a drug distribution operation without getting caught. You didn't know what she was doing. But I should have. I should have questioned why she was so interested. I should have seen. Angela stood up, pacing. My baby sister is dead because I was too blind to see what my mother really was. Emma is traumatized because I left her there. I did this, Harvey. This is my fault. No, Harvey said, and his voice was hard. This is Dolores's fault. She's the one who murdered Brooke. She's the one who ran the operation. You made mistakes, but you didn't kill anyone. Angela sank back onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. I want to see Emma. They went upstairs together. Emma was lying on her bed, staring at the ceiling, Mr. Buttons clutched to her chest. When she saw Angela, she sat up slowly. Mommy. Angela knelt beside the bed, reaching for Emma's hand. Baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I left you there. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I should have listened to Daddy. I should have listened to you. Emma didn't pull away, but she didn't move closer either. Why did Grandma hurt Aunt Brooke? Because Grandma was sick. Not in her body, but in her mind and her heart. She did bad things, and when Aunt Brooke found out, Grandma. Angela couldn't finish. Is Grandma going to come back? No, baby. Grandma is in jail, and she's going to stay there for a very long time. Promise. I promise. Emma looked at Harvey, and he nodded confirmation. Only then did she relax slightly, letting Angela hug her. They stayed like that for a long time, mother and daughter, until Emma finally spoke again. I don't want to see Grandma ever again. Not ever. You won't have to, Angela promised. Never again. After Angela left, she still couldn't bring herself to stay in the house, said she needed more time. Harvey made dinner. Emma picked at her food, eating only when Harvey encouraged her. She'd lost weight over the past few days, dark circles under her eyes, making her look much older than 7. Daddy, she said as he was tucking her into bed. Are you going to leave again? What? No, Em. I'm not going anywhere. But what if you have to work? Or what if Mommy says I have to go somewhere? What if? Hey. Harvey sat on the edge of her bed. Listen to me. I'm not leaving you. And you're not going anywhere without me. No more staying at other people's houses. No more being away from me unless you want to be. Okay. Really. Really. You and me, kiddo. That's the team. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I was so scared, Daddy. I thought they were going to kill me too. Harvey pulled her into a hug, feeling her small body shake with sobs. I know you were scared. But you were also brave. You ran. You got away. You survived. And now I'm going to make sure nothing like that ever happens to you again. How? Because I'm your daddy, and that's my job. To protect you. And I'm very good at my job. Emma pulled back, studying his face with those two old eyes. Are you going to hurt Grandma? The question caught Harvey off guard. What? You have that look. The one you get when you're really mad but pretending not to be. Like that time Tommy Miller's dad yelled at me at my soccer game, and you went and talked to him, and he never came back. Harvey had nearly forgotten about that. A drunk parent berating Emma for missing a goal, Harvey calmly explaining to the man that if he ever spoke to Emma again, Harvey would make him regret it. The man had believed him. Grandma is going to prison, Harvey said carefully. The police and the courts are going to handle it. But you're going to do something else. Something they won't know about. She was too perceptive, this daughter of his. Too smart for her own good. I'm going to make sure she can never hurt you or anyone else again, Harvey said. That's all you need to worry about. Can you trust me on that? Emma nodded, settling back into bed. I trust you, Daddy. After she fell asleep, Harvey went down to his workshop in the garage. He pulled out a notebook and started writing. Not lists of evidence or timelines for the police. They had all that. This was different. He wrote down everything he knew about Dolores Flores. Her habits, her connections, her vulnerabilities. The names of the people involved in her operation. Lance Larson was just one of them. There had to be others. The lawyers who would defend her, the fellow inmates she'd meet, the parole board she'd eventually face. He wrote for hours, filling pages with plans and contingencies, with ideas that ranged from legal to questionable to outright illegal. Some he'd use, some he'd just keep in his back pocket. But by the time dawn broke, Harvey had the beginning of a roadmap. Dolores Flores thought she'd gotten away with something. She thought that even if she went to prison, she'd survive. She'd made bail, Harvey had learned. Her lawyer had somehow convinced a judge that a 62-year-old retired nurse wasn't a flight risk, never mind that she'd murdered her own daughter. She'd be out on bail until the trial, living in her house, maybe even cleaning up the blood from her living room floor herself. Harvey closed his notebook and locked it in his toolbox. Dolores had made a mistake that night. Several mistakes, really, but the biggest one was letting Emma live. Because now Emma had a father who would stop at nothing to make sure justice was served, in every possible definition of the word. And Harvey Wiggins was just getting started. The preliminary hearing happened 3 weeks later. Harvey and Angela sat in the courtroom gallery while Emma waited in a special room with Dr. Weston. She wouldn't testify today, just at the trial itself, but Detective Ott wanted them present to observe. Dolores entered in an orange jumpsuit, her wrists and ankles shackled. Her gray hair had been cut shorter, and she'd lost weight, but her face remained composed, almost serene. She didn't look at Angela, didn't look at Harvey, just stared straight ahead as her lawyer, a slick man named Arthur Valenzuela who specialized in high-profile criminal cases, whispered in her ear. Lance Larson looked worse. His hands shook as he sat beside his own attorney, a public defender who looked overwhelmed by the case. Lance kept glancing at Dolores, like he was looking for guidance, for reassurance. She never once looked back. The prosecution laid out their case, the physical evidence, the 911 call, the witness testimony. They played the recording of Emma's statement, her small voice describing what she'd seen. Harvey felt Angela stiffen beside him when Emma described the knife, the blood, Brooke's screams. Valenzuela cross-examined Detective Ott, trying to poke holes in the timeline, suggesting that Emma's memory might be unreliable given her age and trauma. Ott held firm, citing Dr. Weston's evaluation, the consistency of Emma's multiple statements, the physical evidence that corroborated every detail. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Victoria Flynn, listened with an expression that gave nothing away. When both sides rested, she spoke without hesitation. "I've heard enough to establish probable cause for trial. Both defendants will remain in custody." "Your Honor," Valenzuela interrupted, standing. "My client has significant ties to the community, no prior criminal record, and your client is accused of murder, Mr. Valenzuela. She's already made bail once. That was a mistake I'm rectifying now. Both defendants will be held without bail pending trial." Judge Flynn banged her gavel. "We're adjourned." As they led Dolores and Lance out, Dolores finally turned her head. Her eyes found Harvey in the gallery, and for just a moment, something flickered across her face. Not fear, not regret, contempt. Harvey stared back, his expression calm, until Dolores looked away first. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. The story had gained national attention. Grandmother murders daughter in front of 7-year-old granddaughter, made for sensational headlines. Harvey kept his arm around Angela, shielding her from the cameras as they pushed through to his truck. "How is your daughter doing, Mr. Wiggins?" "No comment." "Mrs. Wiggins, did you know about your mother's drug operation?" Angela flinched, but Harvey kept them moving. "Mr. Wiggins, what do you want to say to the people who claim your daughter's testimony can't be trusted?" Harvey stopped, turned to face the reporter, a young woman with a microphone bearing a local news station's logo. "My daughter is the bravest person I know. She saw something terrible, and she's telling the truth about it. That's all anyone needs to know." They drove to pick up Emma from Dr. Weston's office. The child psychologist had been working with Emma twice a week, helping her process the trauma through play therapy and art. Today, Emma had drawn another picture, not of houses and sunshine this time, but of monsters and darkness and a small figure running toward a light. "She's making progress," Dr. Weston told Harvey and Angela privately. "But she's going to need ongoing support for a long time. Years, probably. The nightmares are normal. The separation anxiety is normal. What's not normal is how resilient she's being. She's processing this in a healthy way, thanks to both of you supporting her." Angela nodded, but Harvey could see the guilt still eating at her. She'd moved back home after the hearing, sleeping in the guest room, tiptoeing around her own house like a stranger. She and Harvey barely spoke beyond coordinating Emma's care. That night, after Emma was asleep, Angela found Harvey in his workshop. "I've been talking to a divorce lawyer," she said without preamble. Harvey set down the carburetor he'd been rebuilding. "Angela, not because I don't love you, but because I've been thinking about what's best for Emma. And what's best is for her to have stability, security, a home where she feels safe. I don't know if she can have that with me. Every time she looks at me, she probably remembers that I'm the one who left her there, that I'm Dolores's daughter. She doesn't think that." "How do you know?" "Because she asked if you were coming home. Because she still wants you to tuck her in at night. Because despite everything, you're still her mother." Angela's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve her." "Probably not. I don't either. But she's ours, and we both screwed up, and now we both get to spend the rest of our lives making it up to her." Harvey stood, facing his wife. "I'm angry at you, Angela. I'm angry that you didn't listen when I said Emma didn't want to go there. I'm angry that you were so busy defending your mother that you couldn't see what she really was. But I don't want a divorce. I want us to figure out how to fix this. I don't know if we can. Then we learn. We go to therapy. We do whatever it takes. Because Emma needs both of us. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let Dolores destroy our family any more than she already has." Angela was quiet for a long moment. Then, quietly, Okay, we'll try. For Emma." "For Emma," Harvey agreed. "And maybe for us too." They stood in the workshop, surrounded by tools and engine parts, and Harvey thought about all the broken things he'd fixed over the years. Some things came apart cleanly and went back together easy. Others required patience, skill, and time. His marriage, he suspected, would be the latter, but he was good at fixing broken things. Meanwhile, Harvey's other project was moving forward. He'd used his connections from the Marines, guys who'd gotten out and gone into private security, investigations, less legal enterprises, to dig deeper into Dolores's operation. What he found made his blood boil. The drug ring had been running for nearly 3 years. Dolores and Lance weren't alone. There were 4 others involved, 2 more pharmacy techs, a doctor who wrote fraudulent prescriptions, and a distributor who moved the stolen medications to the street. They'd been careful, smart, flying under the radar by keeping quantities small and spreading their operation across multiple hospitals. But Brooke had noticed the patterns. She'd been compiling evidence for months, building a case before she confronted her mother. That's why Dolores had panicked when Brooke showed up that Friday night. It wasn't just about family betrayal. It was about a paper trail that could send them all to prison for decades. Harvey's investigator friend, a former Marine named Glenn Hernandez who now ran a private security firm, had found Brooke's evidence. She'd hidden it in a safety deposit box under a fake name, left the key with a trusted friend from work. "The prosecution has most of this," Glenn told Harvey over beers one night. "But there's stuff here they haven't found yet. Names, accounts, transactions. Your mother-in-law was making serious money. We're talking hundreds of thousands over 3 years. Where'd the money go? She was smart about it. Didn't just dump it in her checking account. She set up an LLC, filtered money through fake consulting contracts, made it look semi-legitimate. But follow the paper trail back far enough, and it all leads to one source: stolen pharmaceuticals." Harvey studied the documents Glenn had copied. "Can I keep these?" "Why?" "Because the DA is going to offer her a deal. They always do, to avoid trial. And I want to make sure she doesn't take it." Glenn raised an eyebrow. "What are you planning, Harvey?" "Nothing illegal." "That's not what I asked." Harvey smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing they can prove in court." Over the next 3 months, while Emma slowly healed and Angela tried to rebuild their family, Harvey worked his own case. He reached out to the other people involved in Dolores's operation, not directly, but through intermediaries, through anonymous tips that found their way to the right detectives. One by one, they started flipping. The doctor, Edward McCall, had a gambling problem and mounting debts. When presented with evidence of his involvement and the possibility of losing his medical license plus 20 years in prison, he made a deal to testify against Dolores. The distributor, Dwayne O'Neill, had a wife and 3 kids. He took a plea bargain that would give him 10 years instead of life, in exchange for detailed testimony about how the operation worked. The other pharmacy techs followed suit, each trying to minimize their own sentences by pointing fingers at the ringleader. And through it all, Harvey made sure that every piece of evidence, Every connection, every financial transaction led back to Dolores Flores. Not just as a participant, but as the mastermind. Lance Larson's attorney tried to paint his client as a victim, manipulated by an older woman, scared into violence. But the evidence Harvey helped uncover told a different story. Lance had been stealing medications for years, even before Dolores recruited him. He had his own arrests, his own debts to dangerous people. He'd killed Brooke not because Dolores ordered him to, but because he knew Brooke's evidence would send him to prison. Both stories could be true, but only one would play well to a jury. The trial date was set for late spring, almost a year after the murder. Emma was preparing, working with Dr. Weston 3 times a week now, practicing her testimony, learning how to answer questions under pressure. "She's ready," Dr. Weston told Harvey and Angela. "She's scared, but she knows it's important. And she trusts you both to be there with her." The night before the trial began, Harvey sat with Emma on her bed. "Tomorrow is going to be hard," he said. "The lawyers are going to ask you questions, and some of them might be mean. They might try to confuse you or make you doubt what you saw. But I need you to remember something." "What?" "You're not doing this for them. You're doing this for Aunt Brooke. To make sure the people who hurt her can never hurt anyone else. Can you do that?" Emma nodded, her jaw set with determination that reminded Harvey of himself at her age. "I can do that. That's my girl." The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution built their case methodically: forensic evidence, financial records, testimony from the co-conspirators, the 911 call, Detective Ott's investigation. They painted a picture of Dolores Flores as a calculating criminal who'd exploited her position as a trusted former nurse to run a drug operation that had flooded the streets with opioids, contributing to overdoses and deaths across Austin. Lance Larson's trial was separate, but happening simultaneously in another courtroom. His defense was trying the corrupted by an older woman angle, but it wasn't working. Too much evidence showed his own criminal history, his own motivations. Emma testified on the trial's second week. Harvey and Angela sat in the front row, Emma's eyes finding them every time she felt scared. She told her story in a clear, steady voice, describing what she'd seen that Friday night. Arthur Valenzuela tried to poke holes in her testimony during cross-examination, suggesting her memory was confused, that she was too young to understand what she'd witnessed. "Emma," Valenzuela said in a patronizing tone that made Harvey's hands clench, "isn't it possible you saw something that scared you and your imagination filled in the rest?" "No," Emma said firmly. "I saw Uncle Lance stab Aunt Brooke. I saw the blood. I saw Grandma watching. I'm not making it up. But you were far away, weren't you? At the top of the stairs. I could see everything. The lights were on. And you're sure it was a knife? Not something else that looked like a knife?" "It was a knife. A big kitchen knife with a black handle. It had blood on it after." Valenzuela tried several more angles, but Emma didn't waver. When he finally dismissed her, Judge Flynn called a recess. Harvey met Emma as she stepped down from the witness stand, swept her into his arms. "You did perfect," he whispered. "Perfect." The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, both Harvey and Angela held their breath. "On the charge of murder in the first degree, how do you find the defendant?" "Guilty." "On the charge of conspiracy to distribute controlled substances?" "Guilty." "All counts, guilty." Dolores Flores sat motionless as the verdict was read, her face betraying nothing. Lance Larson was convicted in his trial as well. Both were sentenced a month later. Lance got life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. Dolores got life without parole. Judge Flynn looked down at Dolores from her bench. "You murdered your own daughter in front of your granddaughter. You showed no remorse, no humanity, no indication that you understand the magnitude of what you've done. The state of Texas will ensure you never have the opportunity to harm anyone else. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court certainly doesn't." In the gallery, Harvey squeezed Angela's hand. It was over. Or at least, the legal part was over. Because Harvey wasn't done yet. Prison was supposed to be Dolores Flores's punishment, but Harvey knew how prisons worked. He'd seen too much during his time in the Marines, heard too many stories from guys who'd ended up in the system after coming home. Prison was its own ecosystem, with its own hierarchies and rules. And people who knew how to work the system could make prison almost comfortable. Dolores would be housed at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, a maximum security women's prison about 2 hours from Austin. She'd have protection as a former nurse. Medical knowledge was valuable inside, and she'd trade her skills for favors, for safety, for a life that was bearable. Unless someone made sure she couldn't. Harvey spent months learning everything about Mountain View. The guards who could be bought, the inmates who ran things, the vulnerabilities in the system. He used Glenn and his other contacts to carefully, methodically, plan information. It started small. Word spread in the prison that Dolores Flores wasn't just a murderer. She was a child endangerer. She'd put a 7-year-old in danger, let her granddaughter witness a brutal killing. In prison, where many of the women were mothers separated from their own kids, that was the worst crime possible. Then came the bigger revelation. Dolores's drug operation hadn't just hurt random addicts. It had a body count. 3 overdose deaths were directly traced back to pills that came from her network. One of them was a 19-year-old single mother, her baby found crying beside her cold body 12 hours after she OD'd. That mother had a sister in Mountain View. Her name was Rosalie Pugh, serving 15 years for armed robbery. She was young, strong, and absolutely enraged when she learned that one of her fellow inmates was responsible for her sister's death. Harvey didn't talk to Rosalie directly. He didn't have to. He just made sure the information found its way to her through the right channels, backed up with documentation that couldn't be disputed. 3 months into Dolores's sentence, she was attacked in the laundry room. 5 women, led by Rosalie, beat her so badly she spent 2 weeks in the medical ward. Broken ribs, fractured jaw, internal bleeding. The guards investigated, but nobody saw anything. Nobody knew anything. That was how it worked inside. Dolores recovered, was transferred to protective custody. But she couldn't stay there forever. Prison resources were limited, and eventually they moved her back to general population. The attacks continued. Not always physical. Sometimes it was her food being poisoned, making her violently ill. Sometimes it was her cell being trashed, her belongings destroyed. Sometimes it was just the constant threat, the knowledge that any moment, someone might decide to finish what they started. Word got back to Harvey through Glenn's network. Dolores wasn't adjusting well. She'd lost more weight, developed a nervous tic, spent most of her time alone in her cell. You should see the last photos, Glenn told him. She looks 20 years older than when she went in. Whatever you're doing, it's working. I'm not doing anything, Harvey said mildly. I'm just a mechanic taking care of his daughter. Right? And I'm just a security consultant. Glenn shook his head. I hope she deserves this, Harvey. She let my daughter watch her aunt get murdered. Then she tried to come after Emma to cover it up. So yeah, she deserves this. The final piece of Harvey's plan came together a year into Dolores's sentence. Through his network, Harvey learned that Dolores had been communicating with Arthur Valenzuela, her former lawyer, trying to file appeals. She was also talking to a journalist, someone who wanted to write a book about the grandmother drug kingpin. Dolores's attempt to rehabilitate her image, to paint herself as a victim of circumstances. Harvey couldn't let that happen. He dug deeper into Valenzuela's background and found cracks. The lawyer had his own problems, gambling debts to some very dangerous people, a soon-to-be ex-wife who was taking him to the cleaners, and a reputation that was barely holding together. Harvey, through intermediaries, offered Valenzuela a way out. Clear his debts, keep his practice afloat, in exchange for one small favor. Stop representing Dolores. Drop her appeals. Walk away. At first, Valenzuela refused. But then his creditors got more aggressive. His wife's lawyer got more demanding. And mysteriously, every other attorney he approached to take over Dolores's case suddenly had conflicts of interest or no availability. Valenzuela finally accepted the offer. He withdrew from Dolores's case, citing ethical concerns that he couldn't explain. The journalist lost interest when key sources suddenly refused to talk, when documents mysteriously disappeared, when the story became impossible to verify and too legally risky to publish. Dolores was alone, abandoned by her legal representation and her only chance at telling her side of the story to the public. In prison, isolated and unprotected, she lasted another 6 months before the final attack. This time, it wasn't Rosalie Pugh or her allies. It was someone new, someone with her own grudge, a woman named Hazel Miles, whose teenage son had died from fentanyl-laced pills that traced back to Dolores's operation. Hazel didn't just beat Dolores. She made it brutal, made it last, made sure everyone in that prison yard saw what happened to child-endangering drug dealers who thought they could just do their time quietly. Dolores survived, but barely. She was back in the medical ward for months, and when she finally recovered enough to be moved, it was to a different prison, one with even worse conditions, even less safety. Harvey learned all this through Glenn, who'd maintained his sources inside the system. He never asked for details. Didn't want to know exactly how much Harvey had orchestrated. Some things were better left unspoken. 2 years into her sentence, Dolores Flores barely resembled the woman who'd stood in Judge Flynn's courtroom with that contemptuous look in her eyes. She was broken, physically and mentally, living every day in fear. And Harvey was satisfied. Not happy. He'd never be happy about what Emma had gone through, about the nightmares his daughter still had, about the way she sometimes flinched at loud noises or refused to be alone in a room. But satisfied that justice had been served in every possible way. Lance Larson didn't fare much better. Unlike Dolores, he'd gotten the possibility of parole, which meant he'd be in a men's facility with a shot at eventual freedom. But that also meant 40 years of living with what he'd done, 40 years of looking over his shoulder. Harvey used the same tactics, making sure the right information reached the right people. Lance wasn't just a murderer. He was a child traumatizer. He'd killed a nurse, a woman who saved lives, while a 7-year-old watched. Men's prisons were different from women's prisons, but the hierarchy was the same. And at the bottom of that hierarchy, below even rapists and informants, were people who hurt children. Lance tried to keep his head down, tried to stay invisible. It didn't work. His face had been all over the news. Too many people knew who he was, what he'd done. The first attack came 3 months in. A group of inmates, led by a man whose daughter was Emma's age, cornered Lance in the showers. They broke both his legs, shattered his left arm, and left him bleeding on the tile floor. Lance spent 2 months recovering, then went straight into protective custody. But like Dolores, he couldn't stay there indefinitely. Harvey made sure the attacks continued every time Lance left protective custody. Not enough to kill him. That would be too easy, too quick. Just enough to remind him, every single day, that he'd never be safe. That 40 years was a very, very long time. The parole board would see a man who couldn't function in general population, who'd been attacked dozens of times, who'd never completed any of the rehabilitation programs because he was too afraid to leave his cell. They'd see someone who was still a danger to himself and others. Lance Larson would never make parole. He'd die in prison, old and broken, having spent every day of his sentence in fear. Harvey made sure of it. For years after Brooke Keith's murder, Emma was 11 years old. She'd been through 4 years of therapy, had good days and bad days, but was slowly rebuilding her life. She played soccer again, had friends, got good grades. She still had nightmares sometimes, still didn't like being alone in unfamiliar places, but she was strong, resilient. She knew what her father had done, or at least suspected. She was too smart not to notice the way Harvey's jaw tightened when someone mentioned Dolores, or the way he'd come home from business trips, with Glenn Hernandez looking grimly satisfied. One night, when Harvey was tucking her in, Emma asked the question he'd been dreading. "Daddy, did you hurt Grandma Dolores?" In prison, Harvey sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. "I made sure she faced consequences for what she did to you and Aunt Brooke. The kind of consequences that courts don't always deliver." "Good," Emma said simply. "She deserved it." "Maybe. But Em, you need to understand something. What I did, the things I arranged, they're not things I'm proud of. They're not things I'd want you to ever do. But I'm your father, and my job is to protect you. Sometimes that means doing things that aren't clean or legal or right. Sometimes it just means making sure the people who hurt you never get the chance to hurt anyone else." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, "Do you think I'm bad? For being glad she's suffering?" "No, kiddo. You're not bad. You're human. And you survived something terrible. How you feel about it is between you and Dr. Weston. But I want you to know that no matter what happened, no matter what I did, none of it is on you. You're just a kid who wanted to be safe. Everything else is on me. Do you think Aunt Brooke would be mad about what you did?" Harvey thought about Brooke, who he'd known since she was Angela's teenage sister, who'd helped them move into their first house, who'd been Emma's favorite aunt. "I think Aunt Brooke would want you to be safe and happy. And I think she'd understand that sometimes protecting the people you love means crossing lines you never thought you'd cross." Emma hugged Mr. Buttons closer. "I miss her. I know. I miss her too. But I'm glad I have you, Daddy. You'll always have me, Em. Always." Angela knew something too, though they never talked about it directly. She'd see Harvey's face when news about Dolores filtered back to them. Another attack, another injury, the deteriorating conditions of her imprisonment. She'd noticed the slight satisfaction in his expression, quickly hidden. One night, 2 years after the trial, she confronted him. They were in the kitchen, Emma asleep upstairs. Angela set down her wine glass and looked at him directly. "You're doing something to her." "To my mother." Harvey didn't deny it. "Yes. I should be angry. I should tell you to stop. She's still my mother, and despite everything," Angela's voice cracked. "Despite everything, some part of me still loves her. Or loves who I thought she was. I know, but I can't bring myself to care. I can't bring myself to feel anything but relief that she's suffering, because Emma isn't suffering anymore. Emma is healing, and if the cost of Emma's healing is my mother's pain." Angela wiped at her eyes. "What does that make me?" "Human," Harvey said. "It makes you human. I used to think I knew right from wrong. I was a lawyer. I defended justice. I believed in the system. And now I'm sitting here, knowing my husband is orchestrating some kind of long-distance revenge, and I don't care. I don't care, Harvey." He moved around the counter to her, wrapping his arms around his wife. They'd rebuilt their marriage slowly, piece by piece, with therapy and patience and a determination to be better for Emma. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. "We do what we have to do to protect our daughter," Harvey said. "That's all this is." "Is it over? Are you done?" "Yes. She can't hurt anyone anymore. She'll spend the rest of her life in prison, and every day she'll know why." "That's enough." Angela nodded against his chest. They stood like that for a long time. Two people who'd been broken by circumstances and had chosen to piece themselves back together. Not perfectly, but well enough. 8 years after the murder, Emma was 15. She'd just gotten her learner's permit and was driving Harvey to his shop, carefully navigating the Austin traffic while he provided instructions from the passenger seat. "Check your blind spot. Good. Signal earlier next time." "Perfect." They pulled into the shop's parking lot, Emma beaming with pride at completing the drive without any major mistakes. "Can I help you with the cars today?" she asked. "If you want. Got a '69 Camaro that needs a transmission rebuild. Could use an extra set of hands." They worked together in comfortable silence, Emma handing him tools, asking questions about how things worked. She'd grown into a thoughtful teenager, still carrying scars from that night, but refusing to let them define her. She volunteered at an animal shelter, played varsity soccer, got straight A's. She was planning to study psychology in college, wanting to help other kids who'd gone through trauma. She was going to be okay. "Dad," Emma said as they were cleaning up for lunch. "I never thanked you." "For what?" "For believing me. For coming to get me. For making sure they paid for what they did." She met his eyes. "I know what you did. I'm not a little kid anymore. I know you didn't just let the system handle it." Harvey set down the wrench he'd been holding. I'm not judging you. I just wanted to say thank you. Because you're right. The courts would have given Grandma 3 meals a day and a bed and maybe some library privileges. But you made sure she understood what she'd done. You made sure she really paid. And maybe that's not justice according to the law, but it's justice according to me. Revenge isn't the same as justice. Maybe not. But sometimes they overlap. And sometimes that's okay." Emma smiled, and it reached her eyes in a way it hadn't for years. "I'm happy, Dad. I'm safe. I have you and Mom and a good life. And the people who tried to take that away from me are suffering. That works for me." Harvey pulled his daughter into a hug. She was almost as tall as him now, strong and capable and fierce. "I love you, kiddo." "I love you too, Dad." They went to lunch at Emma's favorite burger place, then back to the shop to finish the Camaro. It was a good day, the kind of ordinary day that Harvey had fought so hard to make possible. That evening, as Harvey was locking up the shop, he got a call from Glenn. "Thought you'd want to know, Dolores Flores died last night. Heart attack in her cell. Prison officials say it was natural causes." Harvey leaned against his truck, processing the news. She was 70. Yeah, 70 years old, and she'd aged about 100 in her 8 years inside. Her heart gave out. Probably for the best, honestly. She wasn't going to last much longer anyway, not with the condition she was in. "Thanks for letting me know. Harvey, for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. She destroyed lives. She killed her own daughter. She traumatized Emma. She deserved everything that happened to her. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just a guy who couldn't let go, who took his revenge too far. Does it matter? She's gone. Emma is safe. That's all that matters. After hanging up, Harvey sat in his truck for a long time, thinking about the past 8 years. About the choices he'd made, the lines he'd crossed, the parts of himself he'd compromised to protect his daughter. He didn't regret any of it. When he got home, Angela was in the kitchen making dinner. Emma was upstairs doing homework. Everything was normal, peaceful, ordinary. Dolores died, he said quietly to Angela. She paused, then nodded. How do you feel? Relieved. And guilty for feeling relieved. And aware that I should probably feel worse than I do. She killed my sister. She traumatized our daughter. I'm not going to mourn her. Angela turned off the stove and faced him. We survived, Harvey. Emma survived. That's what matters. Yeah, that's what matters. They told Emma over dinner. She listened quietly, then simply said, okay, and went back to her pasta. No tears, no emotional breakdown. Just a calm acceptance that this chapter of her life was finally, truly over. That night, Harvey sat in Emma's room while she got ready for bed, just like he had when she was 7. You doing okay? He asked. I'm fine, Dad. Honestly, I'm not sad she's dead. I'm not happy either. I'm ready to move on. To think about other things. College, soccer season, getting my driver's license. Normal stuff. Normal stuff sounds good. Dad, Emma sat on her bed, looking at him seriously. I know you think you did something wrong. That you crossed lines you shouldn't have crossed. But I'm glad you did. Because if you hadn't, I'd have spent the rest of my life knowing that the person who hurt me was living comfortably in prison, maybe even getting out on parole someday. Instead, I got to know that she faced real consequences. That made it easier to heal. So don't feel guilty, okay? You did what any good father would do. Most fathers don't orchestrate prison revenge. Most fathers haven't watched their 7-year-old daughter get traumatized by a grandmother who was supposed to love her. You're not most fathers. You're my father. And you're the best one I could have asked for. Harvey felt his throat tighten. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. Emma grinned. Plus 8 years of therapy. Dr. Weston would be proud of how well-adjusted I am. She would be. I'm proud of you too, Em. Prouder than I can say. They hugged, and then Emma climbed into bed. Mr. Buttons was still on her nightstand, worn and faded, but still present after all these years. Good night, Dad. Good night, kiddo. Harvey turned off her light and closed her door, standing in the hallway for a moment. Down the hall, Angela was getting ready for bed. Below him, the house was solid and safe. Tomorrow, Emma would go to school, he'd go to his shop, Angela would go to work. Life would continue, ordinary and precious. He'd made choices that many people would judge as wrong. He'd arranged for suffering, facilitated violence, crossed lines that most people never even approached. He'd become something other than the man he'd thought he was. Not a hero, not a villain, just a father who'd done what he believed was necessary. And looking back on it all, knowing his daughter was safe and healing and happy, Harvey wouldn't change a single thing. Justice, he'd learned, wasn't always about courts and laws and proper procedures. Sometimes justice was about making absolutely certain that the people who hurt your family could never do it again. Sometimes justice was personal, brutal, and deeply satisfying. Sometimes justice looked a lot like revenge. And Harvey Wiggins was fine with that. He walked down the hall to his bedroom, where Angela was reading in bed, waiting for him. They'd survived this together, rebuilt their family from the ashes, created something stronger than before. Outside, the Texas night was warm and still. Inside, Emma slept peacefully, no longer afraid of the dark or the people who'd hurt her. And Dolores Flores was dead, having spent her last years in fear and pain and isolation, with plenty of time to understand exactly what she'd done and who she'd crossed. Harvey turned off the lights and climbed into bed beside his wife. Tomorrow was Saturday. He'd promised to teach Emma how to do a full tune-up on his truck. It would be a good day. They'd earned a lot of good days, and he intended to enjoy every single one of them. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.